In a shocking twist that blurred the line between reality and performance, reports surfaced claiming that Sean "Diddy" Combs, once a towering figure in music and business, allegedly woke up with a weapon to his throat inside his Brooklyn jail cell. A moment that, if true, marked one of the darkest turns in his downfall. Once celebrated as the unstoppable mogul who defined hip-hop's golden era through bad boy records and luxury branding, Diddy now faces the cold isolation of the Metropolitan Detention Center, a far cry from the flashing lights of his glory days. According to his longtime friend Charlucci Finley, the mogul was attacked by an inmate wielding a sharpened toothbrush, but details remain murky, with no official prison reports or confirmations from authorities. That uncertainty fueled widespread suspicion that the story might have been planted to garner sympathy, perhaps to influence public opinion or legal outcomes. Online, people were divided. Some genuinely feared for his safety, while others saw manipulation, a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative. It's not the first time Diddy has been accused of turning chaos into strategy, and critics pointed out how perfectly timed this incident was, coming just as his lawyers argued for leniency and better treatment. Judge Aaron, who presided over parts of Diddy's case, already faced criticism for being too lenient, while others defended his composure under immense public pressure. Now, as the alleged attack story circulates, it adds another layer of confusion. If it's real, Diddy is learning what fear and vulnerability truly mean. If not, it's a new level of performance art by a man long skilled in narrative control. The irony is striking. After years of accusations that he used intimidation to maintain power, he may now be facing that same terror within concrete walls. Whether this incident was genuine or calculated, it exposes the complex dance between power, perception, and desperation that has defined Diddy's recent years. His supporters insist he's a man enduring a system that wants to break him. His critics argue he's still manipulating every angle from behind bars. Either way, the world watches as the story unfolds. A powerful reminder that even the most untouchable figures eventually face the consequences of their own creation. As the dust settled from the alleged prison attack story, the world began to question not only what had happened behind those cell doors, but why it happened, or rather, why it was being told this way. The timing of the story's release was no coincidence. Just days before, Diddy's lawyers had filed motions highlighting the unjust conditions of his imprisonment, painting their client as a man unfairly targeted, isolated, and emotionally drained. When the reports of a weapon to his throat emerged, it seemed to fit perfectly into that narrative. A once powerful mogul turned vulnerable prisoner, the man who built empires now struggling to stay alive inside the system he had long thought himself above. The problem, however, was that the story had holes. There were no official prison statements, no disciplinary records, and not even a time-stamped incident report, standard protocol for any altercation within a federal facility. That lack of evidence sent journalists and legal analysts into overdrive, questioning if the entire ordeal was a carefully planted leak orchestrated by Diddy's inner circle. The name Charlucci Finley came up repeatedly, his supposed eyewitness account quoted in tabloids from page 6 to the Daily Mail. But no one could confirm when or how he had received this information. Many speculated that Finley was acting as a mouthpiece for Diddy's PR team, feeding sensational stories to keep the mogul's name alive in headlines and subtly push a message of victimhood to soften public perception ahead of any future appeals or pardon requests. Meanwhile, the online conversation took on a life of its own. Hashtags like #FreeDiddy and #JusticeForSean popped up across X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, while an equal number of posts mocked the entire situation, calling it another Diddy production. The split between sympathy and cynicism was stark. Some longtime fans, especially those who grew up during the height of bad boy records, clung to nostalgia and refused to believe that their musical icon could fall so far. Others, especially victims' advocates and younger audiences more tuned into recent lawsuits, saw the alleged attack story as another manipulative stunt, a man used to controlling narratives trying to regain power from a prison cell. YouTubers and podcast hosts dissected every available detail, analyzing timelines, comparing prison protocols, and interviewing former MDC staff to determine whether such an incident could have occurred unnoticed. Their conclusion was largely the same. Anything is possible in a federal facility, but silence from the Bureau of Prisons was telling. When real incidents happen, even involving lesser-known inmates, documentation surfaces. Here, all that existed were rumors, third-party claims, and the convenient silence of a team that had once mastered the art of spin. At the same time, mainstream media began reaching out for comment from Diddy's legal representatives, who either declined or redirected inquiries, creating even more intrigue. TMZ ran a short feature confirming that no credible evidence supported the alleged attack, while Page Six doubled down, quoting Finley again, who insisted that Diddy was targeted and that it could have ended tragically. The lack of clarity only fueled more speculation. To some, it seemed that the mogul's legal team wanted to have it both ways, spreading enough fear to make the public pity him, but withholding just enough confirmation to avoid perjury or further legal scrutiny. That ambiguity became Diddy's greatest tool. For years, he had thrived in the gray areas between truth and myth, between persona and reality. Even now, confined and powerless, he managed to dominate headlines and dictate the tone of conversation. The White House, surprisingly, entered the conversation next. When a reporter asked a press secretary if the president was considering clemency or a pardon for Sean Combs, the response was brief but firm. There are no discussions regarding that matter. That single statement, no discussions, effectively shut down any notion of a pardon but simultaneously gave the story new life. Diddy's supporters flooded social media, demanding justice and claiming political bias, while others mocked the idea entirely, arguing that the thought of a presidential pardon for an entertainment mogul facing multiple civil and criminal cases was absurd. Still, the fact that the question had reached the White House press room proved how effectively the story had spread. What began as a dubious tabloid report had now become a national talking point, stretching from gossip blogs to government briefings. Inside the entertainment industry, the reaction was quieter but just as telling. Former collaborators, producers, and artists who once called Diddy family chose silence, carefully avoiding any public statements. The once loyal network around him had grown distant. Some feared association. Others simply wanted no part in a story that had become radioactive. Even members of Diddy's family, his sons Justin and Christian, who once flooded social media with affirmations of love and loyalty, had retreated into silence. Only small signals remained. A cryptic #FreeDiddy post here, a quickly deleted comment there. The public noticed, and so did the press. Insiders speculated that the family had been advised to remain quiet, as emotional outbursts could complicate legal proceedings or contradict future defense narratives. Behind the scenes, according to one industry insider, every move is strategic, nothing happens by accident. Meanwhile, legal analysts revisited Diddy's case file, pointing out inconsistencies in his legal strategy. The supposed attack conveniently aligned with defense motions arguing that his confinement posed risks to his safety and mental health. They requested special accommodations, a change of facility, and leniency due to credible threats from other inmates. But without official evidence of the incident, judges were unlikely to consider such arguments seriously. Judge Aaron, the same jurist who had faced backlash for allegedly being lenient earlier in Diddy's case, reportedly refused to address the claims publicly, instead focusing on procedural fairness. To many observers, that silence signaled strength, a refusal to let theatrics dictate justice. Others, however, criticized the court for failing to investigate potential security breaches if the incident truly occurred. Either way, the alleged attack had succeeded in reshaping the conversation. No longer were people debating Diddy's guilt or innocence. They were debating his safety, his humanity, and his possible redemption. It was, in every sense, a PR masterstroke cloaked in tragedy. By now, the story had taken on a cultural dimension far beyond the courtroom. Commentators on talk shows began framing Diddy's downfall as a mirror of celebrity excess and moral decay in Hollywood. What happens when fame becomes so powerful that it bends reality itself? Was Diddy's narrative manipulation an act of desperation or a reflection of a system that rewards spectacle over truth? The story tapped into broader social questions about justice, race, power, and privilege. For older viewers who remembered his rise from Harlem to global stardom, the transformation from mogul to inmate was hard to reconcile. For younger audiences raised in the social media era, it was yet another cautionary tale. A reminder that no one, no matter how influential, is beyond accountability. As the conversation evolved, Cassie Ventura's previous statement about her fear of Diddy resurfaced online, shared millions of times as people connected it to the alleged attack. Her words, "I remain very much afraid of what he is capable of," took on new meaning. Many felt poetic justice in the idea that the man who had once instilled fear might now be living with it himself. Victims' advocates emphasized that Diddy's current predicament, whether real or exaggerated, should not erase the pain of those who had accused him. "A man's fear in prison does not equal a woman's trauma in freedom," one viral post read. That comment resonated widely, reframing the discussion from sympathy to accountability. Still, some believed the alleged attack was karma catching up to him, a spiritual balancing act. "You reap what you sow" became a common refrain across comment sections and live chats. Others pushed back, arguing that even the guilty deserve protection and due process. The moral grayness of the situation became the core of public debate. Diddy's life had always thrived in that ambiguity, and now, even in confinement, he was still controlling the narrative through chaos. In the weeks following the story, multiple news outlets tried to verify the timeline of events within the Metropolitan Detention Center. Journalists contacted former staff, lawyers, and family members of other inmates. None reported hearing of an incident matching Finley's description. Some even dismissed the claim as impossible without internal confirmation, since any violent altercation would typically trigger lockdown procedures. Yet, the damage, or perhaps the design, was already done. Whether real or fake, the narrative had reshaped Diddy's image once again, shifting focus from predator to potential prey, from powerful to pitted. As months passed, the alleged attack faded from headlines, replaced by new developments in his legal battles. But its impact lingered, leaving a stain of uncertainty that blurred the line between truth and myth. Was the incident a desperate bid for attention, or a genuine cry for help from a man facing the full weight of his actions? In the end, perhaps it didn't matter. What mattered was perception, and perception had always been Diddy's greatest strength. Even from behind bars, stripped of his wealth, status, and entourage, Sean Combs still knew how to make the world talk. And as the cameras and commentators continued to dissect his every move, one thing became clear. Diddy's story was no longer about music or fame. It had become a masterclass in the psychology of image, power, and redemption. Whether he orchestrated the tale or truly lived it, he once again turned life into performance, ensuring that his name, controversial, infamous, yet unforgettable, would never fade quietly into the background. As the media storm over Diddy's alleged prison attack simmered down, the real reckoning began, not just in courtrooms but in the public's conscience. The illusion of invincibility that had surrounded Sean Diddy Combs for decades was crumbling in real time, and what emerged from the cracks wasn't the suave, untouchable mogul the world once idolized, but a deeply complicated man whose legacy now stood on trial before the court of public opinion. Networks that had once praised his entrepreneurial genius were now replaying old interviews, dissecting his past comments for signs of manipulation or hypocrisy. Even award shows that once invited him as a guest of honor were quietly editing his name out of montage reels. Industry insiders whispered that no one wanted to be associated with the chaos anymore. Diddy's name used to mean power, one former executive told Variety. Surfaced that Diddy had been keeping a private journal for years, allegedly documenting his fears of betrayal. Now it means danger, social, financial, and moral. The empire he built on influence, branding, and reinvention had begun to implode from within. Revolt TV, once touted as the voice of black culture under his leadership, was now distancing itself from his image, scrubbing posts and rebranding around new voices. Business partners began exercising contract clauses that allowed them to sever ties for reputational damage. What once looked like a temporary scandal was evolving into a full-fledged professional exile. The shift wasn't sudden, it was cumulative. Every unresolved accusation, every resurfaced lawsuit, every viral clip of Diddy behaving arrogantly on camera now formed a puzzle that the public was eager to piece together. Social media became the courtroom, and every user a juror. TikTok creators analyzed old music videos for symbolism, claiming they revealed hidden patterns of control. Reddit threads speculated about his ties to other fallen moguls, drawing parallels between Diddy, R. Kelly, and Suge Knight. It was digital archaeology, sifting through decades of pop culture to find the real man behind the myth. And with each re-examination came another question. How much of Diddy's success was built on genuine talent, and how much on fear, intimidation, and manipulation? The conversation was shifting from gossip to morality, from celebrity downfall to systemic accountability. Yet amid the chaos, some celebrities remained cautiously vocal. 50 Cent, never one to hold back, took to Instagram to post cryptic memes mocking Diddy's situation, writing, "They say God don't like ugly. Guess he really don't like freak-offs either." The post gained millions of likes and set the tone for how much of hip-hop viewed Diddy's downfall. Not with sympathy, but with vindication. Others like Kanye West, who once admired Diddy's business acumen, stayed silent, perhaps wary of reigniting their own controversies. Former associates like Maze, The Lox, and Aubrey O'Day from Donady Kane gave interviews filled with restrained bitterness. "It's like watching the mask fall off," Aubrey said during a podcast appearance. "Everything we went through suddenly makes sense." Even Cassie, though she kept quiet publicly after settling her lawsuit, became an unspoken symbol of vindication. Every new scandal involving Diddy seemed to validate her warnings. Her silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. Still, not everyone was ready to abandon Diddy. Loyalists like Stevie J and certain members of his old bad boy crew insisted that he was being targeted by a system that loved to see powerful black men fall. They referenced the historical parallels of black icons torn down by scandal, from Michael Jackson to Bill Cosby, framing Diddy's situation as another chapter in a long narrative of racial double standards. That defense resonated with a portion of the public who saw hypocrisy in how swiftly corporations and the media erased Diddy compared to other white celebrities accused of similar misconduct. But critics countered that accountability isn't racism, it's reality. "This isn't a conspiracy," one journalist wrote for The Atlantic. "It's a consequence." That debate, between persecution and punishment, between redemption and reckoning, became the heartbeat of Diddy's post-prison narrative. Behind bars, insiders claimed Diddy was struggling to maintain control. Sources close to his legal team said he oscillated between calm acceptance and explosive frustration. He spent hours drafting notes and manifestos about rebuilding his legacy, allegedly writing that the public would one day understand the bigger plan. Some described it as delusion, others called it survival instinct. For a man who had spent his life scripting his image, being stripped of that control was the ultimate punishment. His empire had been built on charisma, on the ability to spin chaos into coolness. Now, every word he uttered risked becoming evidence. According to leaked reports, Diddy spent most of his time in isolation, avoiding interactions with other inmates and communicating primarily through his lawyers. Gone were the lavish parties, the entourages, and the endless cameras. All that remained was silence and the echo of choices made long ago. Meanwhile, journalists began unearthing stories from the early 2000s that once slipped under the radar. Tales of intimidation, NDAs, and whispered settlements. Former assistants recounted moments of rage and control, painting a picture of a man who operated like a king within a court of fear. Each revelation deepened the sense that Diddy's empire had always been a powder keg waiting to blow. The media wasn't just reporting anymore, it was unraveling a mythology. One viral documentary on YouTube titled The Cult of Diddy racked up over 10 million views in 2 weeks, connecting the dots between his professional dominance and personal downfall. The comments section became a digital confession booth for former fans expressing disbelief and betrayal. "I grew up idolizing this man," one wrote. "Now I feel like I was cheering for a villain." The financial impact was equally devastating. Major streaming services quietly adjusted playlists, reducing his visibility. Brand deals evaporated. His liquor partnerships, once worth hundreds of millions, turned toxic assets. Lawyers speculated that if civil cases proceeded, Diddy's fortune could be reduced by more than half within a year. Yet, true to form, insiders claimed he was already planning a comeback narrative. They described him sketching out ideas for a memoir or documentary. Something raw, redemptive, and self-explanatory. "He still thinks he can spin it," said one former publicist. "He believes that if he can just tell his side, people will forgive him." That belief, naive or not, was quintessentially Diddy. Even stripped of power, he remained a strategist. As the months passed, the public's fascination didn't fade, it evolved. Diddy became a cultural case study. Talk shows debated whether his story represented the inevitable collapse of celebrity culture or a rare moment of accountability in an industry built on silence. Sociologists called it the Diddy effect, the idea that fame can no longer protect those who weaponize it. The narrative echoed through college classrooms, news segments, and social media discourse. But amid all this intellectualization, the emotional core of the story remained raw. A man who had everything, losing it piece by piece, watched by millions who once danced to his music. And yet, there was still a haunting allure to it all. For every critic condemning him, There were still fans playing his songs late at night, reminiscing about an era of hip-hop that felt untouchable. Nostalgia became his last shield. People wanted to separate the art from the artist to remember "I'll Be Missing You" or "Mo Money Mo Problems" without the weight of scandal. But as more details emerged, that separation became impossible. The music was no longer just music. It was a soundtrack to a man's manipulation of image and influence. Each beat now carried echoes of control, ego, and consequence. Then came the unexpected twist. Reports and downfall long before any legal trouble began. Pages from that journal, leaked to the press, revealed paranoia about fake friends, industry spies, and plots to destroy him. Whether authentic or fabricated, the leaks added another layer of psychological intrigue to the story. It painted Diddy as a man who had seen his fall coming and tried, unsuccessfully, to outmaneuver it. "They'll try to take me down because I built something they couldn't control," one entry read. To his supporters, it proved his foresight. To his critics, it was just more evidence of a narcissist rewriting history, even in self-reflection. As 2025 progressed, the Diddy saga became less about scandal and more about survival, of legacy, of relevance, of self. His legal team continued to fight for appeals, but even they seemed to know the battle wasn't just in the courtroom anymore. It was in the culture. Every tweet, every headline, every whisper contributed to the shaping of Diddy's final act. Whether he would emerge a cautionary tale, a misunderstood genius, or a disgraced icon depended not on facts alone, but on the narrative he managed to reclaim. Because if there's one thing Sean Combs always understood, it was that perception is power. And even now, in the twilight of his empire, he was still chasing both. By the time the world entered the next chapter of the Diddy saga, the conversation had shifted from shock to study, from outrage to observation. People were no longer merely reacting to his downfall. They were analyzing it, trying to decode the man behind the empire and the mechanisms that sustained him for so long. Sean Diddy Combs had always been a master of image, a shapeshifter who could morph from street hustler to mogul, from music visionary to motivational preacher. But now that same talent had turned against him. Every new attempt to rebrand was met with skepticism. When his team leaked reports that he was turning to faith and reflecting deeply on his mistakes, the internet laughed it off as yet another PR ploy. "You can't confess your way out of karma," one viral tweet read. Yet those close to Diddy claimed that something truly had shifted within him. Gone were the fiery outbursts, the obsessive need to control every detail. Instead, there was an eerie calm, a man finally confronting the silence he'd spent decades drowning out with noise, fame, and attention. The transformation wasn't clean or quick. It was messy, painful, and full of denial. Insiders said Diddy struggled with insomnia and paranoia, often replaying old interviews and music videos in his mind, wondering where it all began to unravel. He reportedly asked himself over and over, "When did I stop being me?" For a man who had always defined himself by motion, stillness had become the enemy and the teacher. The industry, meanwhile, began rewriting its history in real time. Documentaries, podcasts, and think pieces popped up weekly, each offering a new lens on his rise and fall. Netflix reportedly greenlit a limited series exploring the era of excess, loosely inspired by Diddy's reign, while Hulu commissioned a true crime-style investigation into the dark side of hip-hop power. Former collaborators who once refused to speak were suddenly lining up for interviews, each eager to reclaim their narrative before someone else wrote it for them. What emerged was a chorus of contradictions. Some painted Diddy as a tyrant who ruled through fear and manipulation, while others described him as a visionary whose ambition pushed everyone around him to new heights. That duality became the essence of his legacy. Genius and greed intertwined, brilliance and brutality fused into one. The more people learned, the harder it became to separate the man from the myth. Yet, amid the cultural excavation, there were still those who defended him. Not out of loyalty, but out of recognition that Diddy's story was also a mirror of the system that enabled him. "You can't make a monster and then act shocked when it bites," one music executive told Rolling Stone. The industry rewarded everything he did, until it didn't. Inside prison walls, Diddy's introspection deepened. Reports claimed he had started reading spiritual texts, journaling, and even mentoring younger inmates, though whether out of genuine growth or calculated optics was anyone's guess. One rumor suggested he was drafting a book titled The Mirror of Me, detailing his journey from Harlem to the height of fame and the loneliness that followed. His lawyers neither confirmed nor denied it, but the title alone stirred public curiosity. Fans wondered, could Diddy truly be changing, or was he just writing another script for the world to consume? Those who had known him longest said that even if redemption was possible, it would never come easily. Diddy doesn't know how to live without an audience, one former friend said. If he finds peace, it'll be because he learned how to exist in silence, and I don't think he's ever done that before. But silence, ironically, became his most powerful statement. For months, there were no public messages, no leaks, no interviews. Just absence. And in that void, people began to fill in their own versions of what he might be feeling or planning. Some claimed he was meditating daily. Others believed he was plotting a comeback through faith-based ventures. Then, unexpectedly, a handwritten letter surfaced on social media, allegedly penned by Diddy himself and leaked through an anonymous account. The note read, "I built walls to protect myself from pain, not realizing I was trapping myself inside them. I don't ask for forgiveness yet, I ask for understanding." Whether real or fake, the words hit a nerve. Thousands shared the letter, calling it the first time Diddy had ever sounded human. Others dismissed it as ghostwritten manipulation, but one thing was undeniable. The narrative had shifted again. The same man once accused of arrogance was now being talked about as fragile, broken, maybe even repentant. The pendulum of public perception, as always, swung on his terms. While Diddy wrestled with self-reflection, the industry continued cleansing itself. Artists who once idolized him began distancing publicly. Drake removed subtle references to Diddy from his lyrics during a tour. Rihanna, who had once attended Diddy-hosted events, began supporting domestic abuse awareness campaigns with renewed energy. Even artists who had built their sound off the bad boy blueprint were now acknowledging the darker side of that legacy. The label's logo, once a symbol of swagger and success, became shorthand for excess and exploitation. And yet, there was no denying the imprint Diddy left on the culture. His influence still pulsed through beats, fashion, and business models. He had changed the game, for better or worse. The tragedy, as many saw it, was that he couldn't separate his greatness from his greed. He taught us to dream big, one cultural critic said, but he also showed us what happens when you believe you're the dream itself. The most haunting part of Diddy's downfall wasn't his loss of wealth or fame, it was the erasure of his legacy in real time. Awards once proudly displayed in museums were quietly removed. Universities that had honored him rescinded awards and distanced themselves from his foundations. His name was scrubbed from sponsorships, scholarships, and charity lists. For someone who had spent his life building an empire designed to outlast him, this slow deletion was the ultimate punishment. Yet, even as the world turned away, Diddy's story refused to die. Journalists began noticing something fascinating. Despite the controversies, his music streams were surging again. Younger listeners, many too young to remember his prime, were discovering his catalog through the lens of scandal, treating him as a cultural artifact rather than a living figure. They're studying him the way we study Gatsby or Scarface, one analyst noted. He's become a symbol of the American paradox, success built on sin. That paradox deepened when, months later, a major television network aired a documentary titled Diddy: The Rise, the Reign, the Ruin. The film juxtaposed his early triumphs, his mother's sacrifices, his bold business moves, his revolutionary approach to branding, with the chilling testimonies of those who said they'd been hurt by him. It was neither a takedown nor a defense. It was an autopsy of ambition. The final scene used footage of a young Diddy in the studio declaring, "I'm going to be the biggest in the world." The camera froze on his face mid-smile as the narrator said, "And he was, until the world decided it didn't want him anymore." That moment went viral, spawning endless commentary. Some saw it as poetic justice. Others called it tragedy. But everyone agreed, it was history. In the quiet aftermath of that broadcast, the idea of forgiveness began creeping into the conversation. Not in the sense of exoneration, but in the recognition that Diddy's fall had forced a cultural awakening about power and accountability. Therapists, academics, and faith leaders started using his story as a cautionary framework for ego, fame, and self-destruction. Even those who despised him admitted that his downfall had sparked necessary conversations. Could that be redemption in itself, not through sympathy but through education? For the first time, perhaps, Diddy's influence was being used for something other than personal gain. By late 2025, whispers of his possible release began circulating. The idea of a man who had once ruled the world walking out of prison as a shadow of his former self fascinated the media. Would he seek revenge? Redemption? Reinvention? Nobody knew. Some imagined him retreating entirely, living in isolation. Others believed he would stage the most dramatic comeback in entertainment history. But those who had studied his psychology believed the truth was simpler. Diddy would always try to rewrite the ending. That's who he was. The man who turned grief into Grammy-winning hits, who transformed scandal into headlines, who saw every crisis as a chance to create a new version of himself. And maybe that was his curse as much as his gift. Because in the end, Sean Combs had never really been chasing wealth, fame, or power. He'd been chasing control over his story, his legacy, his reflection. And now, in the silence of his consequence, he finally faced the one thing he could never control: how the world saw him when he wasn't performing. As the months crept by and the headlines faded from front-page hysteria into muted background noise, the name Sean Diddy Combs began to settle into a strange limbo between myth and memory. He was still everywhere and nowhere at once, a ghost haunting the same culture that had once crowned him king. For a while, even the tabloids seemed to grow tired of the daily speculation about his mental state and legal fate, but then came the whispers, subtle at first, murmured through entertainment blogs and anonymous insider accounts, that Diddy might soon walk free. The story spread like wildfire. A potential early release for good behavior, a rumored legal loophole, maybe even quiet political influence. People didn't know what to believe, but curiosity rekindled. The public that once shouted for his downfall was now peeking through their fingers, morbidly fascinated by what his comeback might look like. In every rumor, there was an unspoken question. What would Diddy do with freedom? Would he try to rebuild, or would he disappear into silence? Those who'd known him best doubted he'd stay quiet. Diddy's never been the kind of man who fades away, one former producer told a podcast audience. If he gets out, he'll make sure the whole world knows. Yet, beneath that bravado, there was an undeniable truth. The world had changed and Diddy's power had evaporated. The gatekeepers he once manipulated had grown cautious, the artists he once mentored now kept their distance, and even his wealth, once thought limitless, was reportedly crumbling under legal costs and frozen assets. He wasn't returning to the empire he'd built. He'd be stepping into the ruins of it. Behind the walls of Fort Dix, where he was said to have been relocated after his high-profile stint in Brooklyn, Diddy's days had taken on an eerie rhythm. Gone were the extravagant suits, the champagne, the entourage. Instead, he spent his mornings walking laps around the prison yard, often alone, head bowed, lost in thought. Other inmates described him as polite but distant, a man trying to hold on to dignity while wrestling with regret. Some said he'd begun offering motivational talks during group sessions, encouraging young offenders to build themselves back up. It was an ironic echo of his old "can't stop, won't stop" mantra, now stripped of glitz and delivered in the hum of fluorescent lights. Whether the talks came from genuine self-reflection or calculated image control was anyone's guess, but they gave him purpose. And for the first time in decades, Diddy wasn't orchestrating or performing, he was surviving. Letters he wrote to his family were said to be tender and self-critical, admitting that the man they once looked up to had lost himself in the chase. There was talk of him praying nightly, using it as a warning against ego and excess. He became addicted to being seen, one sociologist said on NPR. And when the world stopped looking, it broke him. Still, the fascination lingered. Clips from his old interviews resurfaced on TikTok, spliced with somber captions like "Pride comes before the fall" or "The price of power." The irony was that in trying to erase him, culture had immortalized him in a new way, as a cautionary legend. By late 2025, rumors of Diddy's release grew louder. A blog posted what it claimed were leaked documents showing a transfer request under review. No one could confirm it, but the speculation ignited debates across social media. Some argued that Diddy had served enough time and should be allowed to rebuild his life. Others insisted that releasing him would send the wrong message about accountability. Even within hip-hop circles, the divide was sharp. Artists like 50 Cent mocked him openly, while others like Kanye, ever the provocateur, hinted at forgiveness and second chances. The public was split down the middle, but there was no denying one thing. Diddy's story still drew attention, still provoked emotion. He was no longer admired or feared, but he was still relevant. And for Diddy, relevance was oxygen. When a grainy photo leaked showing him sitting in a visitation room, older, thinner, and wearing simple gray prison sweats, the internet froze. Gone was the confident posture, the diamond smile bravado. His head was shaved close, his expression unreadable. Some viewers claimed he looked humbled. Others thought he looked calculating, like a man quietly plotting. That's the face of someone who's going to flip the narrative again, one user commented, and maybe they were right. Diddy had always known how to turn weakness into momentum. Insiders whispered that if and when he got out, he planned to start a foundation focused on prison reform, a move that would mirror the redemption arcs of other fallen icons. It sounded noble, but skeptics weren't convinced. "Every scandal ends with a charity," a journalist tweeted. But redemption without accountability is just marketing. Still, Diddy's potential comeback sparked a strange hope among some older fans who had grown up on his music. For them, his story wasn't just about crime or fame. It was about time, about watching an era fade. He had been the soundtrack to their youth, the face of aspiration, the symbol of turning struggle into gold. Seeing him fall felt like watching the American dream collapse in slow motion. One fan in her 60s said in an interview, "If he can come back from this, maybe anyone can." That sentiment, naive or not, revealed something deeper. The public's hunger for redemption stories, even from those they once condemned. Diddy's greatest power had always been knowing what the culture needed before it did. And right now, in a cynical, weary world, the culture craved rebirth. But redemption required more than silence and strategy. It required confession, and that was the one thing Diddy had never truly done. Every apology in his career had been wrapped in ambiguity, every statement crafted for optics. Whether this time would be different was uncertain. Some legal analysts said that a genuine apology could sway public perception, perhaps even open doors for limited business opportunities post-release. Others argued it was too late. "He's not coming back to the same world," one entertainment lawyer said. "Influence doesn't regenerate after a scandal of this scale, it just mutates." Even so, networks and publishers were reportedly circling, ready to buy rights to his life story the moment he stepped out of prison. The man who had once built an empire on spectacle was now the subject of it, his pain and punishment the new product. Inside his cell, Diddy allegedly began drafting outlines for a memoir, part reflection, part reckoning. The working title changed weekly, Resurrection, The Last Hustle, From King to Servant. Each title hinted at both ego and humility, two forces that had always battled within him. He was said to be writing about faith, legacy, betrayal, and the cost of chasing immortality. Whether the book would ever see publication was unknown, but even the idea of it reminded the world that Diddy, for all his silence, was still scripting his story. Perhaps he always would. As the year drew to a close, a strange calm settled over the narrative. Diddy's name appeared less frequently in gossip columns and more in discussions about rehabilitation, systemic corruption, and celebrity accountability. His case was being taught in media ethics classes. His career was dissected in sociology courses. He had, in a way, achieved the ultimate paradox. His destruction had made him a lesson, and in being studied, he remained eternal. Behind bars, he might have lost everything tangible, but beyond those walls, his name still echoed. And maybe that was all he ever really wanted, to be remembered. If freedom did come, the world knew it would hold its breath the moment those gates opened. Would he emerge as a changed man, or as the same strategist who'd always found a way to turn scandal into survival? Would he seek peace or power? No one could say. But as the final light of that long year faded, one truth became undeniable. Sean Diddy Combs, the man who once said he couldn't stop and wouldn't stop, had been forced to pause. And in that pause, the world had learned as much about itself as it had about him. The intoxicating dance between fame and forgiveness, between downfall and rebirth, between who we worship and why. Whatever came next would no longer be just Diddy's story. It would be a reflection of the culture that built him, broke him, and still couldn't look away.